Unlucky, Mr. Webb.
Oh, and lucky. Well, it's not really lucky because this bill is an exercise in vanity. It's wasteful and it's unnecessary. The irony of this government bringing a bill about good lawmaking principles and process when only last week they were rushing through covertly pay equity legislation which stripped hundreds of thousands of women of rights of claims that were in process it does not escape me. It's absolutely shameful. And what does this bill say? What are the values that underpin this bill? What are the values that David Seymour wants to bake into our Constitution as if it was the Public Finance Act? Property, individual rights, freedoms, equality, limited levies and taxation, costs and benefits. Just one thing. There is no cost-benefit analysis of this bill. The stupidity of a bill pitching for costs and benefits when it can't prove its own cost or benefit is just outrageous. So that's what the bill says. What doesn't it say? What's the bill silent on? What about our fundamental constitutional principles and values? Does it mention the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act? No. Does it mention the Treaty of Waitangi? No. It's entirely silent on whether a good lawmaking process is consistent with the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. Does it mention privacy? No. Does it mention discrimination against minorities? No. Does it mention international obligations? No. So it is a cherry-picked right-wing neoliberal agenda that we have in front of us. And then what do we have? David Seymour gets to pick a handful of his mates to be on the Regulatory Standards Board. A board that will consume $18 million a year for nothing. A little personal coterie of appointed clipboard-holding bureaucrats. To do what? To do nothing that isn't already being done.
That's right.
This, of course, we already have the Legislation Design and Advisory Committee, a committee which has a huge amount of detail as to what good lawmaking is. It provides much more balanced guidance than a few little principles of David Seymour's. So basically, what does the Legislation Design and Advisory Committee do? What does it say about appointing a board? Well, it says this about appointing a board. A new public body should be created only if no existing body possesses the appropriate governance arrangements or is capable of properly performing necessary functions. Do we need a statutory board to do this? That's basically what it says. Don't go making boards when you don't need them. So once again, we've got a good principle there from the Legislation Design and Advisory Committee, but David Seymour says, no, I want my own personal board. Right. My board that actually also not even independent. The legislation as it stands says that the board is accountable to David Seymour, appointed by the Minister and accountable to the Minister. So it's David Seymour's little pet organisation. It is wasteful, it's duplicative, it's bureaucratic, it's tainted with neoliberal ideology. But here's another thing. In clause 24 of the bill, it says this. This Act does not confer a legal right or impose a legal obligation on any person that is enforceable in a court of law. Do you know what that actually means? That means we're spending all our time passing a law which isn't a law. Right. It doesn't create any legal obligations. It is an utter waste of time. All it is an exercise in flag waving. And it's a neoliberal little flag that's being waved. But probably the most offensive thing about this bill is not that it seeks to promote some of those neoliberal ideologies, but it's the fact that it is yet again an attack on Māori. Because once again, we have a founding constitutional document, the Treaty of Waitangi, which sets out the partnership between Māori and the Crown. And in this place, this lawmaking function is an exercise of the Crown's powers. The idea that in doing it, we shouldn't turn and look and say, does this meet our obligations under the treaty, is absolutely shameful. And as the Waitangi Tribunal has said, this should not proceed. A bill of this nature, in this form, should not proceed. And of course, once again, it's bad lawmaking. The legislation says, consult with affected parties appropriately. Was there targeted consultation with Māori, with iwi, with urban authorities? No, there was not. There was not. And what's worse, the pre-introduction consultation that occurred, how did they read the submissions? With a bot. With a bot. And I'm not talking about David Seymour. I'm talking about genuine an AI program. They didn't even read the 23,000 submissions. Why? Because they're not interested. They're not actually interested in the fact that over 90% of those people said this is a very bad idea. Right. Bad in so very many ways. So they swept them aside, and David Seymour had the temerity to say there was no really good ideas in there. You know, he didn't even read them. No one in the Ministry for Regulation read them. They ran them through a computer. And that is particularly shameful because he comes forward as if he's some kind of defender of democracy, and yet when people actually want to participate in the democratic process, She's not interested. Because if they don't repeat his ideas, if they don't reflect his values, then they're left-wing crazies. Well, you know what? This is a bill which would increase the inequity in our society. It entrenches property rights as essentially the centrepiece of that government. And if you do that, you're going to make the rich richer and the poor poorer. Nowhere in there did I see anything about well-being, about social cohesion, about what the effect on our society would be, about equitable outcomes for everyone, about addressing the inequalities which exist in our society. Those are the principles that I bring to this House when I think what good lawmaking is, not simply protecting property rights, not compensating people at every turn. Essentially, those rules, the idea that you can't impair a property right would have stopped us fencing swimming pools. Because you've got to compensate them because that's an impairment. You couldn't require landlords to have healthy homes because it's an impairment on a property right. This kind of, don't limit the free exchange of property is absolute bunkum. It is simply entrenching inequality that exists in our community already. And the idea that this is going to cost $18 million a year to administer when we already have the Attorney General doing Attorney General's reports through the Crown Law Office, the Legislation Design and Advisory Committee. He's already got his own pet ministry, which is supposed to be doing this work through regulatory impact statements and helping with departmental disclosure statements as well. There is a raft of effective tools out there already, but he doesn't want to spend his time making sure that those are done. Of course, the irony is this. There are all those tools out there, but he doesn't use them himself. His own legislation doesn't use them. Look at the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi Bill and look at the poor regulatory impact statement there. Look at the poor process that was embarked on there. He can't meet his own standards of good regulatory quality. So it is ridiculous, and he says one thing and he does another. The bill is a waste of time, it's duplicative, and it's vain.
Yeah, great speak.
Honourable Maramadeli.
Okay. After it took a while for Duncan's speech to start,
I agree with Duncan. Just doing a brief reading of the, and sorry, I have to do a million things at once because I'm eating and reading and listening all at the same time. But yes, on the summary of submissions consultation on the proposed regulatory standards bill, doing a brief reading of that, yes, what Duncan said about a fucking robot doing it appears to be true. Especially if we look at the way how the analysis was done. So I don't even think David Seymour read this.
no,
Got
it's pretty
C-3PO to
much
read it.
Yeah.
Oh, the bill itself.
No. The responses to the proposal.
Sorry,
Yeah, in the policy document,
Yeah.
the drafting.
Yep. So it's basically Seymour said, okay, I've written a proposal. There's a series of questions that you guys want to ask, that you guys can answer. Tell me whether you like this bill or not, or like the proposal of this bill. And 88% of submitters said, no, we think it's a piece of shit. And 0.3% of people said, hey, no, this is actually really cool. So it didn't even pass the smell test.
Yeah.
Have you seen Evan Almighty, the film with Steve Carell?
Yes.
He goes for a congressman and he's suddenly got to read this 500 pages over the weekend and can't go with his family and blah, blah, blah. I mean, yeah, it does seem like these guys have refused their team support in favor of their ego. Yes.
Yeah, no, Duncan is not wrong about his analysis. I support his findings.